Welcome again to another segment, ladies and gentlemen. So, what do we have? We have the DNC going on, and guess what? Promises from Kamala Harris. So what's going on? You know, the funny thing about the DNC in Chicago, what is this week, is that they're creating a perimeter with a 3-mile barrier so nobody can get in. And they're walling off this entire zone where the DNC is. Understandably, they're afraid that somebody's going to do something stupid. But isn't that enough? And they're checking IDs, by the way. Isn't that crazy that the same party who has been saying for years that IDs and walls are racist are using the same things, IDs and walls, in order to protect their venue and identify all the people? That is insane. That is just wonderful. Kamala Harris wants to ban price gouging. What do economists say? So she's just pulling so many tricks. She wants to give $25,000 to first-time homeowners to buy a house. She's gonna fight food distributors or producers in this case, and just do price controls or price gouging, you know. And all these things look... Oh, she also copied President Trump idea of not taxing overtime hours. Tips. There was tips. How unoriginal. I haven't heard a solid political strategy from what they want to do. What does she want to do for the next 4 years? I haven't heard anything. It's all about feelings. It's all about, oh, it's going to be great. It's a woman. It's black. He was Indian. She was the border czar. And not anymore. She never been the border czar. Don't say that. So her plan has been slammed as potentially instituting harmful price controls. Economists are split. Food inflation has eased some recently, but prices still remain much higher than they were before the pandemic. Americans hate high prices. Everybody hates high prices. Come on now. And Kamala Harris says she plans to combat them by banning price gouging in food and groceries. But depending on what form it takes, economists could hate her plan. So she said she laid these plans at the feet of businesses, and many of them believe that corporate greed is to blame for inflation. However, in some cases, I can believe that because crony capitalism does exist, and sometimes when you have you're the sole producer of a certain item, you don't have competition, or you agree with your competition to increase prices on some items, then yes, that can be crazy, and that's not cool for people. But if we look at the recent history in the last 4 years, during this presidency, we had COVID, we had supply chain issues. So U.S. grocery prices jumped significantly after the federal government issued lockdown guidance in March 2020 in response to the global COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic caused disruptions in the supply chain because workers were not able to work and to return to farms and factories to produce. And the food supplies couldn't keep up with demand, and prices started to rise. Delays in processing meats and eggs, for example, pushed up prices. You remember where eggs were far more expensive than... I remember in some instances they were up to 300%. Insane, unacceptable for eggs. Globally, borders were closed in so many countries, which led to higher prices for important food products, including coffee and sugar. The costs of energy, raw materials, and labor rose, and manufacturers passed those expenses on to retailers. They, in turn, passed them on to consumers. The same phenomenon occurred in transportation. As fuel prices increases, those costs were passed on eventually to consumers. So, look, I don't know what you want to say. Always, what happens is that costs are always passed to consumers. Why? I don't know. It's crazy because companies and distributors need to profit. And I understand to some extent the margins that they work on, they're very little, and therefore they need to make their cut. And who's going to pay? It's you, it's me. And I hate that, you know? So there were higher prices for imported food like coffee and sugar. The cost of energy, raw materials, and labor rose, and manufacturers passed those expenses on to retailers once again, you see. So one crazy thing that this little research, the little piece that I found is that doesn't take into account the inflation, okay? So too much money chasing too few goods. And that's what happened, you know, when the government just printed out of thin air billions of dollars because of the pandemic. That's what happened. And you remember somebody said that Janet Yellen and others said that inflation was transitory, and then boof, it just blew in their face, in our face. So listen to this. The CPI food subindex rose almost 25% between March 2020 and March 2024. Over the 4-year period, the price for eating at home rose 24.7%. Yes, because you got to buy the groceries to live. While eating away rose 25.6%, most likely due to the rising costs of labor and ingredients at restaurants and other establishments. And don't even get me started with the tips, okay? Because when I go to a place and I get my cup of coffee and then they see the cashiers flipping the screen around me and ask me for a 25%, 20% tip just for passing me a cup of coffee, no, that's not fair. You don't deserve a tip. A tip is supposed to be exceptional service. And if you ask me, these restaurants should pay their people better, because let me take you for a cultural excursus here. So I was in Italy and I would go to a place to eat a pizza. So I would pay for the pizza. By the way, a margarita in Italy, it's €3.50. You're talking about a margarita, okay? So it's about this much, €3.50, okay? 4 or 5 euros if you want something else and more with different flavors and different toppings on it. It's insane. It's cheap. It's fairly cheap. Then the restaurant is gonna charge you for the cost for the covered. That is like if you eat inside or something. And you're going to pay the taxes, of course, the drinks and whatever, and it's going to be cheaper. So here instead, they pay their employees very cheap, like $10 an hour, at least where I'm here in the state, or minimum wage. And the no benefits, and the customer has to fit the bill with tips. Now, if you offer me exceptional service that you enjoy, you make my experience great, okay? And you offer out of the world service and you really make me laugh. It's not like you're a joker or your goal is to make me laugh, but you give me a pleasurable experience because I already go out very, very little. Okay? So when I go out, don't screw up my dish, don't screw up my entrees, what I choose. Just do your job, okay? And then yes, I may give you a tip, because you provide exceptional service. But nowadays the tip has been like, this thing has been going out of control a little bit. And we really need to take a hold to it, because you see, cost of living is high. And if you need to add a tip, I understand everybody's hurting. So I went a little bit deeper. So we need to make a distinction when Kamala Harris says, ban price gouging. Because we have price gouging and then we have price control. The two are different because they are different in their timing and when they occur and for how long they are implemented. Okay, and they are similar, they're a little bit different at the same time, and they have different consequences. So, for example, when you have price gouging happens during emergencies where consumers are particularly vulnerable. Let's see, for example, like Hurricane Katrina, where this guy bought like a shit ton of toilet paper or other supplies and generators. He bought 14 generators, I think. This guy with a U-Haul, he drove, I don't remember what state he was in, and he drove to where the affected areas of Hurricane Katrina, and he just tried to sell those generators double the price. However, the police stopped him and they didn't make him sell anything, and nobody got electricity for nothing because they took all his equipment that he bought. Okay, so as well as during COVID, people were trying to sell black market like toilet paper and hand sanitizer. There was huge market for those because you can find them anywhere. So a ban on price gouging can prevent exploitation, ensuring that essentials goods like food, water, and medical supplies remain accessible to everyone, not just those who can afford inflated prices. So they prevent the ban on price gouging prevents panic and hoarding because people rush to buy essentials. Well, you see what happened, the toilet paper craze back then in COVID. The first time in my life that I've seen that, by the way. And then bans help stabilize the market, preventing these behaviors that can exacerbate shortages. And then we have some ethical considerations because, of course, it is unethical to profit on other people's suffering, on other people's misfortune. And in honor of fairness or solidarity, these things should not exist. And somehow we should be protected by these things, And then, of course, a ban on price gouging maintains social order because everybody goes nuts. Everybody rushes to the store, people, stampedes and all that crap. So you don't want any of that. Those are the pros, okay? Because there is a protective element there. What are the cons? The cons are price naturally rise because you distort price signals of supply demand. So when demand exceeds supply, signaling producers to increase production or suppliers to allocate resources toward their needed the most. A ban of price gouging can distort these signals, potentially leading to prolonged shortages. Then reducing incentives for supply because higher prices can incentivize suppliers to bring in more goods and the greater personal risks of costs. So production goes on no matter what. And then there's also the cons are the challenges in enforcement because it makes it difficult to define what it means excessive pricing because generally if a resource is scarcer, it's going to be more expensive to purchase. And then you have, of course, unintended consequences where the quality of goods is reduced to offer less variety or simply withdrawing from the market altogether. And this can affect consumers in the immediate. So what can we say about price control from the government? So price control are implemented by a central authority, in this case the government, and they can basically have a price ceiling and they can have a price floor. They say you cannot, this is the minimum price, a price floor, you can sell an item. This is a price ceiling. This is the maximum price you can sell an item for. And then, for example, let's say rent control, okay? So there is limits on rent and landlords can charge tenants to keep houses affordable. Or during times of crisis, governments might cap the price of fuel, to ensure that it remains accessible for anyone. So what are the effects of this? Well, you have shortages, black markets, and quality reduction. Pretty much the same things that we said before in price gouging. So what is the rationale behind price controls? The government was to assure equity. Equity means allowing everybody to afford those goods because if it costs more, only the rich can afford them, and therefore this is not good. If it's for survival, you understand what I mean? Assuring that essential goods and services remain accessible to all. And then price control can help stabilize prices in times of economic turmoil, preventing rapid inflation or deflation. You gotta watch out. Political consideration. Sometimes price control are implemented to satisfy political demands, particularly from groups that stand to benefit from them. Oh, look, what do we have here? Somebody makes promises, like renters or farmers. You have potential drawbacks. What are they? So there's a distortion of market mechanisms. Again, you're going to interfere with the natural order of supply and demand. And that's an equilibrium that can be disrupted. Do you have reduced investments? Because this is going to affect industries as businesses and because they find them unprofitable. Therefore, they just quit producing that item that is going to be there's going to be a price limit to it, dictated by a government agency. So what do we have here? So and I found some historical examples of this. So many cities, such as New York and San Francisco, have implemented rent controls to keep housing affordable. However, this has also led to reduced investments in rental properties, with deterioration of existing properties and housing shortages. This is not recent, it's like an historical thing. And then we have the Nixon's wage and price control of 1971. So President Richard Nixon imposed wage and price controls to combat inflation. Initially, it helped stabilize prices, but when controls were lifted, inflation surged, leading to economic challenges. So there is risks. Of course, you can just do that for a short period of time. And I don't know how it would work in the long run if you're not going to create unnecessary economic stress, for the industries creating this. Because when we talk about the discussion of price control and the economic policies, what comes to mind is communist countries, because communist authorities, you have a central government that dictates what everybody else does, in this case also the economy. And when you have centralized price setting, the government controls all the aspects of the economy and evolves around prices that are based on the assessments of what is fair and what is necessary. You got no saying, rather than allowing market forces like supply and demand to act. And of course, we have an example like in the Soviet Union, because it starts always in good faith. We want everybody to afford the basic necessities, and behind the guise of ideological goals of equality and equity in the end, but what happens due to the disconnect in the economy between the government set prices and the supply and demand? What happens is that many communist economy experience shortages. And then you have long lines, and you have rationing at the same time. So under the communist government, for example, in Cuba, there's always struggled with shortages of basic goods because of state-controlled prices, or prices were set too low. So this led to excessive demand and insufficient supply. This happens. And also in Soviet Russia. So empty store shelves, and producers had little incentive to create or generate products. They were low enough, because what are you going to make profits out of that? Are you crazy? In communist, you're gonna make money? No way. Well, in the end, what does this bring? Impacts the economy, the quality of the products, and innovation, because you start cutting corners and you just do the minimum necessary. There's going to be economic inefficiencies, as I said, because you cannot predict and manage supply and demand. Instead, if you leave it to the market, everything is going to adjust. And I'm going to tell you a short story here that I have. So while price controlling capitalists of mixed economies are usually targeted and temporary, in communist countries, price controls were often pervasive and permanent. The intention was to maintain equality and control over the economy. Yeah. So there's this story here that Soviet officials visited Paris in the 1950s. Okay. And among them, there were these high-ranking officials that were tasked to observe how everything worked in a capitalist society, And during a formal dinner, at the French government guest house, so the Soviets were fascinated on the efficiency of the bakeries, of the Parisian in Paris bakeries, around the city. And this guy asked, but how do these bakeries know how much bread to make each day? And this question, of course, surprised the French dignitaries, because they say, what is this guy asking? Where's this guy asking me? And well, because there's a difference between central planning and living a free market society run according to supply and demand. So the French explained that the amount of bread baked is influenced by the local demand, seasonal changes, and consumer preferences, elaborating on the concept of market signals on how bakery adjusts the production based on customer feedback, and sales patterns. So everything is dictated by that. And that makes you realize that the capitalist economies are flexible in their approach and balancing this act between supply and demand. And that's what makes the system work to a certain extent, as long as you have a fair game and all the actors just play this game fairly. Now let's go back to Kamala Harris. So do I think that these are just talking points that will be difficult to implement? Well, yes, I do. The other problem that I have is that these people have been in power for the last 4 years, and they've had the Senate and to a certain point also had the House Representative. And there were many things that they could have done for the economy. And to their eyes, they've done a lot, the Green New Deal and other things. But I do not know if this has gone to actually influence the the everyday American. Because we got the Ukraine war, now we got that quagmire with Israel and the Arab countries around Lebanon and Palestine, with the slaughter that is still going on. So I do not know if the economic policies have really benefited. And I think the economy is still holding on by a string, by some force until the election happened. And then making all these promises is gonna make it in a way that let's get reelected and then we'll see. Just like, what is this giant thing that politicians have? They're not economists. So the national debt, $35 trillion. Now, if you have $35 trillion in debt, why are you giving money away to other countries? Like last week, I was reading something. They were giving like $287 million to ISIS, I think. Or all this money that they send for genders and studies and whatever in other countries, or what are you sending all this money for? That's not really gonna benefit anyone. And we left $87 billion when we left Afghanistan. This is really insane. So we're squandering money left and right. And do you think this is a good way to run your household? If you are in debt and you just go around and spend, what do you spend? So we need to keep the budget in balance, and nobody's talking about this. So what I see in these presidential debate is that everybody's attacking the personal character of the other, and everybody's based on personality. We need to get our head out of our brains, if we're going to use another term, and we just want to work on understanding what are your ideas to make America great in the next four years. Make America great. That's it. Okay, so what is it going to be? What are you going to do? What is your vision for a better America? What do you think? What are you going to do for America? Because what are you going to do for America is going to reflect on the world. And it's not like I want to be, I never think of as being an interventionist. I think we just care for our business and rebuild our country and be stronger, and not just going around and create new quagmires here and there. So the road is still long. We just have a few months left, but hey, we just need to be more critical thinkers, not just like the character or the personality. What is this person going to bring to America? And we just need to think like this. This is all for this segment, and I'll see you next time, folks. Bye.